Okay, so here inside Capture One, to get your screen to look the same as mine, do me a favor, go up to the window menu, come down to Workspace, and come down to Simplified Tethered Capture. This is what we've been working with all along. And if you do that, then at least your screen should look something similar to mine. You may have a different image up, but I'll go up to the top and select. This is the first image that was in the group. Double click right up here, right next to the word. Just double click on that part right there and it should show you everything. Go all the way up to the top, come over to View, come down to Exit Full Screen. And now just drag this guy up into the corner.
Oh, like this?
Yep, there you go, and you can drag the other one down. Did you get yours?
Yeah, we're good.
Is everybody okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so if we take a look, basically what we've done so far in Capture One is we've gone through these first two things over here on the side. This is the library. If you click on that, this is where you do all your organization, set up new sessions, all that kind of thing. The next one over is camera. We got through all of camera. What we need to get to today is the rest of what's going on over here. So the next one I want to go over to is the one that looks like sort of like a graph. This is actually the exposure tab. And so with the exposure tab, has everybody gotten to that part right there? Go ahead and select the first image because you won't get any readout in here unless you've got an image selected. If it's just blank like this, all of these things will be blank. So I'm going to hit on this guy. So in the exposure tab, personally for me, there's things that I change in here because there's things that for the most part, I don't think you really need. And the first one is the histogram. I don't use histograms because I'm always using color cards in there. If you want to keep your histogram, that's fine, but I want to just go through the mechanics of how we get rid of things and add things. So with histogram actually selected or opened up here, I'm going to click on the little three dots to the top right-hand side of this, and I'm going to simply remove the tool. I don't use it, so there's no reason for it to take up space for me. If you want to get the tool back, go all the way down to the bottom of your screen on the left-hand side under the thing that says curve. And then however you do a right mouse click is what you need to do. Some people can do a two-fingered swipe on their trackpad. For me, it's always holding down the control key and just click your mouse and you'll get a drop-down menu. And in that menu, come over to Add Tool, and then you can go right back to Histogram and click on it. That brings the histogram back, and then you can actually click on the top bar of the histogram and reorder it. You can drag it up to the top. We can bring it all the way up to the top like that. You can also drag any, and this is true for any tool, you can grab that histogram, the bar at the top, and you can completely pull it outside of the palette that's over here, and then you can resize it. You can actually make it much bigger so that you have a much bigger idea of what's going on. Like I say, these are true of every single tool that there is you can do this with. So if you're working on a really big screen, there's a lot of digital techs who work on big screens who will literally pull things off and just keep it like this. The focus check is a one that a lot of people will do this with. If you've got enough screen real estate, you have this really big focus check window, and it just makes doing that work easier. But again, I'm going to get rid of it by clicking on the little three dots here and just say Remove Tool. There is a tool, though, that I do want to add down here to the bottom that I do think you need. So again, right mouse click, in my case it's Control click, and the tool we're going to add is the Base Characteristics. And in base characteristics, what this is that this is where you can actually assign a different ICC profile for your image. And that becomes important to us because if for some reason the wrong profile got tagged into this image, this is how you can ultimately correct it. So you'll see here in the drop-down menu right here that in my drop-down part, it'll scroll all the way down and it'll show me all of these other possible profiles. This was shot with a Phase 1 P30, and you will notice here that there's a different series of profiles that exist for that. These are just color tunings for it, basically. But at any rate, this just, like I said, it becomes important in case you have a file that got tagged wrong or not tagged at all. This is where you would actually fix that part. So then going up to the top again, I'm going to scroll up at the top right here. I'm going to take base characteristics and drag it all the way up to the very top. And this is now actually set correct. However, you'll also notice in here that there's this thing that says engine. And right now it says, in my case, and it should say in your case as well, Capture 110. Is that what everybody has? What that means is that this file was initially worked on and processed in the version, Capture 110 version of this file. So I'm going to show you a good trick here, because what that means is that usually the most important things that are happening when Capture One changes from one to another is they update their color processing engine. And so the difference in what Capture 110 did and what Capture 112 will do can be huge. And there's a way for us to actually see that, to see the difference in what the two would be like. So first off, we need to color balance this image. If you take a look at the image that's right underneath it, Liz, tell me when you get up, because there's a file you need to download. So tell me when you get to our Canvas site. If you select on the picture of the girl on green, this is the same exact setting that I was using to shoot this top picture, and you'll see she has a color card on there. If you hover over where the color card area is and hold down your space bar, you will temporarily get the hand. If you double click really quick, you will zoom into that spot. If you double click again, you will zoom back out. But I'm going to say double click to go in really tight. Then we need to actually get the white balance tool. To get to the white balance tool, it's the tool sets that are right up at the top underneath the title of our session. And it's the one now that actually looks more like an eyedropper. If you click on this, there's a little drop down arrow right underneath it. And you want to actually use this to pick your white balance. Then come down onto our color card session right here. And again, I'm going to click on the gray patch that's right next to the red. That will color balance this image. And then if you look at the very top of your screen up here at the top, you will see that there are two arrows. There's an up arrow and a down arrow. The up arrow, or the one that's pointing up to the right, is how you copy whatever adjustments that we've made here. The down arrow is how you paste those adjustments. And you'll notice that the down arrow is grayed out right now because we haven't copied any of the adjustments. So if you click on the up arrow, that's now copied the white balance of this or anything else that we'd done to this image. If we had done exposure adjustments, if we had done color corrections, anything that we had done would actually now be copied to the adjustment clipboard. You'll notice that the down arrow now has become live and possible to work with. So then go back to the original image. Again, if you want to zoom out, hold down your space bar, hover over the image, double click, you'll zoom back out. And then simply click the down arrow and it will apply that color correction to that image. So does everybody have a normal image? So Liz, go to our website. Thanks. Okay. So back in this guy, we can actually look at a couple of other things. You'll notice that underneath base characteristics, we also have white balance. It's actually sitting right here. And in the white balance that's sitting right here, if you had clicked on this eyedropper, it's the exact same eyedropper. However, we need to look at a couple of things that are sitting here in the white balance. And you'll notice that different tools have different sets of things here. In this palette right here, they're all pretty much the same. When we get to, well, you'll see they're not exactly the same, but they're pretty much the same. 3 dots, that one. You'll notice here that under base characteristics, it's got 3 little dots, it's got a drop-down menu, it's got a return guy, it's got another double-headed arrow and a question mark. You'll notice that in white balance, they've also added an A underneath this. So different tools have different setups. If we come, we'll do it on the white balance one. If you click on the 3 dots of the white balance, this is how you can remove the tool. We don't want to remove that tool. If you click on the next one down, this is actually where you can save whatever we've done here as a user preset. So let's say you had done some really interesting color, white balance work here, whatever, and you wanted to simply save that as a preset that you could use later on. This is exactly where you would do it. If we go to the next one over is how you undo the tool alone. So now there is a global undo and there is a tool by itself undo. So if you click on this right now, you'll see it goes back to the girl. It removes the custom white balance that we just did on that. If you hit Command Z, which works here in Capture One, it'll actually bring this back. If you want to simply see what the tool is doing without completely undoing it or getting rid of it, hold down your Option key and click on that back arrow, and it will temporarily turn that off. And then when you let go, it'll come back on. I'm going to click to get rid of it again, to actually get this to go back out again. And then I'm going to select the second file here at the same time. So I'm going to select the one that's right underneath this guy by holding down the Command key so that you can see both of them at the same time. You'll notice that I've got a hard white line that's going around this outside. This is telling me that this is the primary guy. If you want the second one over here to be the primary one, simply click on its thumbnail and you'll notice that the heavy white line comes around him, or around her as it were. So that's actually a way to actually view these things. If you hover over the image that is of the girl holding the card, hold down your Shift key, the space bar, and double click, you'll zoom into that alone. If you again double click, it'll zoom back out. However, if you add the Shift key, so now I'm holding down space bar and Shift key and double clicking right on her face, you'll zoom into both. If you continue to hold those down, you've got the hand, as you start to move the hand around, you will move both of these around as well. This is still my primary variant that I've got going on right here. So that's what they call these things, or variants. The next tool over in the white balance is a double-headed arrow. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what it's going to do. It's going to copy the adjustments to the clipboard of this primary variant right here. And then, again, hover over it, it'll tell you. Hold down the Option to suppress the dialog, hold down Shift to apply immediately. You don't have to hold down either one of those, just watch what happens. If you click on this, it's going to open up the clipboard itself, and it's going to say, okay, we copied the white balance to that. Do you want to then apply this white balance to everything in the image? To all the images that are selected. Now we've only got 2 images that are selected, but I'm going to go ahead and say yes, apply that, and you'll just see it's a shortcut. Instead of having to hit the up arrow to copy the adjustments and then the down arrow to paste them, it's simply a much faster move to do that. So this is the tool specific to do that, meaning that's only going to affect the white balance. If you hover over the very top of your screen in this area that's right up in here, right above sort of where you have the did you get this file, Liz? Yeah. Okay. This area right up here, if you hold down the Control key and click on this drop down, you will see that you have a customized toolbar. If you click on that, it will open up this thing, and there's a number of things in here that we can actually add. And the one thing I always add is that double-headed arrow. It's sitting right here. I simply drag and click on it and bring it up here to the top. And you can see it's now, this does the exact same thing we just did. It's just a shorter version of it. There's spacers in here that we don't need because they're pushing other tools that we do use out off this frame. So you can simply click on these guys and drag them off, and it will bring your double-headed arrows back in. If you click on this double-headed arrow, you can actually drag it over and drop it right down next to the double-headed arrow guy, and it just keeps your adjustment part really sort of neat and clean right here. And then simply say done, and that part will actually be done. So we're going to continue to work on this one image right here. The problem is that right now I've got 2 selected, and if I click on the first one again, I don't unclick on the second one. You've got to de-click on both of them. To do that, hover your cursor right outside the edge of the thumbnail and simply click once, and they both go away, and then click on that guy again, and it comes back in. Again, hold down your space bar as you hover over the middle of the image and double click, and it'll zoom it back out. So this is what we call a variant. However, there are ways that you can actually make multiple versions of this file. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create another version of this file to see what the difference would be between the Capture One 10 engine and the Capture One 12 engine to do this. So to do that, with this guy selected, come up to your image menu And I take that back. Let's just do it right on the top of it. It's easier to do control clicks on these. So again, whatever you do for your right mouse click, do it on this thumbnail. Again, mine's control click. And if you look right up here at the top, it'll say there's two options that we have here. One is a new variant, and the next one is clone variant. I want you to pick on new variant first. And when you do that, you'll see what it does is it actually makes a copy of this file. Now, it has not created a new set of raw data. This is just another thumbnail version of that data. However, when we did new variant, it removes all of the adjustments that we have actually made on that guy. And it also numbers them. You'll see up here at the top now, you've got a 1 and a 2 right here. If you click back on your number 1 here, we're going to do the other variant or the other type. Hold down the control key or whatever your right click is. Come down and do clone variant. And now you'll see that we've got a 1, 2, and 3. What the clone variant did was it actually makes a copy of that file, but it brings in all the corrections, anything that's actually been done to it. It brings all of those in. Does that sort of make sense? So the thing about new variant, it's a great way to actually get a version of your file that doesn't have any corrections on it to compare to the work that you've actually been doing without losing the work that you've been doing. So I'm going to click on the number 2 one right now because I don't need it. If you simply hit the delete key, it will go away. You'll also notice now we've only got a 1 and a 2. So we've only got 2 variants and they actually look exactly the same. Now in this case, I'm going to select on the number 2 variant to make it active, and I'm going to click on this upgrade button. And it's going to say, do you want to upgrade this? Upgrading the latest engine will provide the best. Your settings will be permanently, blah, 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 yeah. Go ahead and say upgrade this engine right here. You'll notice now that this engine says Capture 112. If we come back to the first one, it still says Capture 110. So the previews that we are getting here are the 2 different engines. Again, if you hold down your command key and select to get them side by side, this one right here, you'll see there's a little 2 right here. This is the one that's supposed to be designed to be processed by Capture 112. This is the one on the left is the one that's Capture 110. Again, hold down your space bar and the shift key both, and double click right on this girl's face to zoom in, and you can actually see in a tighter way the difference in those engines. Now those look pretty close to me, although I am picking up a little bit more yellow in the Capture 112 engine part of it. That seems not to have it's not quite as warm as the other version on here. Does that look that way to you guys? It's very subtle. Simply click on the upgrade button. So again, if I was only on this variant right here, do you have your base characteristics up here yet? There's an upgrade button right here if you are in a previous version. Did that work? You may not have base characteristics because you had to add it. Yeah, click on, we're going to get rid of your histogram. Just click on the little 3 dots and remove the tool. Come down here to the very bottom, control click on the bottom, or right click, add tool, and you're going to add base characteristics. Drag base characteristics all the way to the top. Yep, and let go. And then on this second one only, you'll see it says Capture 110. Go ahead and click on upgrade and then say upgrade. And then hold down your command key and select the other. This is now version 10, and that's version 12. Thank you. And yours, it also looks like it's a little bit darker and more saturated on that screen. So anyway, guys, variants are really important things to actually have because they give you these really great befores and afters and multiple ones that you can actually use. All right. I'm going to go back to my very first variant right here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get rid of that second variant. I don't need it. I just wanted to show you guys what that was about and how they work. I'm going to hit the delete key to get rid of it. I'm back to my just the very first one. It's still in the Capture 110 engine. I'm not really that concerned about this part right now. But I want to go through the rest of all of this, what's going on down here. In that base characteristic, you'll see that this is a Phase 1 P30 Plus flash. If you click on the options, there are different versions that you can use of this same camera back, because that's what it was. It was a P30 back, that will slightly impact the color of your image. I tend to stick with how it was shot. It was actually shot with flash, so that seems to me to be a better place. If you click on the next thing down under this, it says auto. There is a curve that's actually applied to this as well. And again, this is a contrast curve that is moving this information from a linear capture space to a logarithmic one. There's one in here that says extra shadow. You can use that if for some reason you've got something that's got really, really deep shadows. This will actually help open it up. The next one will actually pump in contrast. The next one down is what auto usually picks unless there's something really weird going on. The next one down is linear response. These two, the one that says scientific and the one that says linear response, are both used. Linear response is actually used for people who do copy work in museums. They don't want any odd contrast curve put on anything. They want to actually do that much later in post. So this just removes all of that. And then the linear scientific one is for people who do a lot of work with electron microscopes. They would actually be using this right here. But in our case, auto will be fine. We've gone through the white balance part here, simply using the white balance tool. Again, all of these things, we should finish this talking about these little icons that run across here. So we talked about the double-headed arrow the last time. The next one over, that A, stands for auto. And again, nobody uses auto, but that's what that little A stands for. So if you wanted to do auto exposure or see what auto exposure looked like, you would simply click on that A. If you wanted to see anyway, that's what that is. The next thing over, the little question mark, if you click on the little question mark and you're online, it immediately takes you to Capture One's website, to the page of the manual for the tool you just clicked on. So you can see I was clicking on the white balance tool. It's sitting right here. It gives you a brief description of what's going on. And if you need to go greater in depth, simply click on the link underneath that, and this will tell you everything about that tool. So it's just a very quick way to navigate. So if all of a sudden you don't remember what base characteristics are, so we'll go back to Capture One, you don't know what this is, simply click on the little question mark right next to base characteristics. It will tell you this is what it basically is right here, and if you need more information, click on base characteristics, and this is everything that you could possibly want to know about it. It's a great thing to have. I would also possibly suggest that you download a copy of the user guide and keep it on your hard drive that you're going to carry with you everywhere, so that if something comes up and you're like, shit, I really don't remember what that is or how to use it, you've got a quick reference for it. Back into Capture One. The next tool down, so Kelvin Intent, these are basically, all these are the sliders that you use to control the two axes in an LAB color space. Kelvin is the blue-yellow range, so if you again click on this and drag it up, you're adding yellow. If you drag it down, you're adding blue. Tint is the green-magenta axis, so again, if you, let's zero this out again. So again, I haven't copied anything new to the clipboard, so if you simply click on the down arrow, it will apply that the original color balance that we had to that. Then if you go to the tint and start to drag it in one direction, you'll see that's pumping in a lot of magenta, and if you go in the other direction, that's pumping in a lot of green. Again, I'm going to simply click the drop-down menu to apply that normal color balance. I actually only work with using a color picker and the white balance tool. The next one down is exposure, and if you click on exposure and drag it up and down, the advantage of exposure in Capture One, although Photoshop now is moving their exposure tool to be closer to what happens here, is that exposure in Photoshop used to be basically brightening just the mid-tone range, and it would leave the highlights and the shadows alone. In Capture One, that was never the way it was. In Capture One, exposure works just like it does in your camera. It raises everything or lowers everything. It causes everything to be more exposed or not. So it's just like opening up your aperture on your camera. If you open up an aperture on your camera, the shadows, midtones, and highlights all get more light. If you close down, the aperture of your camera, the shadows, midtones, and highlights all get less light. At any rate, so that's what that is. So if you need an overall exposure correction, this is where you would do it. Contrast is simply separating, it's taking, if you add contrast, what it's doing is it's taking midtones and pushing them towards the ends, towards highlights and shadows. You can see it makes things contrastier. You can also lower contrast in this. I personally think that the dropping contrast in Capture One in their engine is much, much, much better than the one that is in Photoshop. The one that is in Photoshop just makes it look ugly. They should call it the ugly slider. Brightness here is, again, what exposure used to be in Camera Raw. It is primarily taking the midtones and either raising the midtones or lowering them. And the reason that's important, it's different than exposure in that if you change exposure, you actually, let's say you add exposure, it'll open up your shadows, but it can blow out your highlights. If you drop your exposure, it can do the exact opposite. It can actually lower your highlights, but it can block up your shadows. What brightness does is it tends to leave the highlights and the shadows alone, and it only raises and lowers the midtones. So you don't get into either blocking up your shadows or clipping your highlights. And then saturation, we all know what saturation is. It's just pushing all the colors that we've got away from their complementary color part to make them more saturated. So that's actually what's going on in here. If you do one of these sliders and you click it out and you want to return it really quickly to 0, simply double click on the knob and it goes back to 0. If we then click on, come up to Capture One 12, actually the menu, come down to Preferences. Inside of Preferences, if you click on Exposure, you will see that this is where you can set the warnings for exposure. I'm going to actually click on mine and drag the highlight exposure warning down to 250. In most of the cases for you guys, the way Capture One ships is that shadow warning is not enabled. You would definitely want to enable that, and I typically put that around a 15. This just lets me know, 15 tells me that I have got enough detail that I can actually work with it, I can process it. When you get less than 15 in your shadow, you don't really have enough information to truly process the file. So anyway, that's how I'm going to set these guys for this right now, and then I'm going to actually take a look at that to see the warnings. It is this little triangle that sits up in the very top of your toolbar. It's the one that's got the sort of exclamation point in the middle. If you click on that, you'll actually see that it actually brings up a warning here. You can see in the case of this, I'm going to actually zoom in a little bit tighter by simply using this tool to come in tighter on this. You can see I've got some blocking up that's happening in the shadows underneath her. What you can't see and what I don't know, because I think it's happening right around this area, is that I'm worried about blowing out highlights in here, but my highlight warning is red, and if it's actually happening in this red area, I won't be able to see it. So to actually check on that, come back up to Capture One, down to Preferences again. You can actually click on the exposure warning color that you're actually using on this, and you could sample a different color. So for instance, I can click on this primary green over here and close this up. And now, if I was getting it, I would actually pick it up in green here. If you really zoom in to this girl's eyeball, you will actually see that that green is being flagged right in there. Her eye is actually, just that part of her eye, in the white of her eye, is actually burning out. I'm going to return my preference to that pure red. Again, simply clicking on the exposure warning and come to 3 o'clock on this guy, and then close this thing up, and it just takes it back to pure red. And now you'll see it's a little bit easier to see it. You can see that that red is actually in here. When you use your, and again, this is really minor here. You can see that there's another highlight that's right on her lip. When you use high dynamic range, what high dynamic range does is it actually recovers highlights and it opens up shadows. So to see how the tool works, I'm going to zip back out just a little bit. All I'm doing is clicking on either the minus magnifying glass or the plus one. There's also a slider here, but the slider is not as fluid as it actually used to be. The slider now only does these jumps between even amounts of 100. The little magnifying glass does the exact same thing. But at any rate, you'll see that there are shadows that are being blocked up, and there's those little highlights up in this, her eyes that are actually being clipped. So if we grab the dynamic slider, high dynamic range one, and I'm going to do the highlight one first, and we start to drag it forward, you'll actually see that it'll start to change that red. So I'm looking for the highlight that's actually in the center of her eye, and you can see that when I get up in around the 60s, it's almost gone. Certainly I've grabbed all the stuff that was on her lip. I may never get everything that's in that eye because it may just be completely burned out. To open up the shadows, you would do the same thing. This is shadow recovery here, and you simply watch what's going on. I'm watching the blue disappear as I start to drag this up, and you can see that that's now opening all that shadow detail. Now, in my case, I think it makes the image really flat. I don't think that really should have shadow detail in it. This is what's actually going on in this image now that we've actually changed. Again, to get a preview of what just this tool alone is doing, hover over the icon that's the little arrow pointing backwards, hold down your Option key and click, and it temporarily turns that tool off. Let go and it comes back on. That's the preview part. If you don't hold down the Option key and simply click on it, it resets the tool. And frankly, I think all these areas that are in blue really should be, they should not have shadow detail in them. So this is actually correctly exposed. I'm going to turn off that warning so I don't see that part anymore. Come down. Levels and curves here in Capture One works exactly the way it does in Photoshop. However, there's a couple of things. It's just the interface is different. That's really all that's going here. If you come down and you open up levels, you can come up here to the very top. You can actually, these are input and output values right here. So you can see what will happen here. I'm going to drag, this is the black point input. I'm going to drag it and I'm going to bring it up. And what I'm saying now is that this is the input at the bottom, and it's saying zeros, which are deep shadows. Well, 0 is black. This is all the deep shadow. I'm remapping that 0, what would be a black, I'm remapping it all the way up to a 62, which is a mid, it's a mid 3/4 tone here. If you continue to crank this all the way up, you can get it up to 128. I'm not sure you can go a whole lot more. Now I'm saying that I want all of my zeros, all of my blacks to actually be a middle gray. And you can see that's what happens to your image. I'm going to drag it all the way back down again. You can do just the opposite. You can say your input, you want to make your inputs blacker. So I'm going to drag my input and I'm going to drag it up to 128. I'm just looking at these numbers down here at the bottom. I'm going to say I'm taking it up to 128, and now what I'm doing is that I'm saying everything that is from 0 to 128, I want to remap down to 0, and that's why I've got so much black in my image. None of this is really helping the image look any better, but nonetheless, that's what it is. You can do the opposite with the white point. Again, if you kick back here, what I'm saying is that I want everything in my white points right here. I want all of my 255s, which would be white, up to down to 188 to be pushed down to 188. You can do the same, the opposite of that. You can actually remap and say, okay, this is, I want to take all of these highlights, all of these quarter tones and make them white. So that's what's going on there. And then there's the midtone slider here. This is basically going to affect brightness. So again, I'm leaving my highlights and shadows alone, but I'm impacting the brightness. These tools are exactly the ones that exist in, the same ones that exist in Camera Raw. What you will notice though is you cannot remap the midpoint of that brightness. That guide does not change. This is for RGB overall. You can actually do this on an individual channel basis. The next tool down is curves. And curves works exactly the way it does in Photoshop, in the sense that you can click on a point and drag it up or drag it down. You can tear points off to get rid of them. If you want to add contrast here, we could click on one point to lift our contrast a little bit more here, and click and drop our contrast a little bit more here. The thing is that we are doing this though in RGB, and again, when you do it in RGB, it is changing not only the color, but not only the tone, but it's also changing the color. And you can see I've added contrast to this, but I've also shifted this. I've made the color of this image warmer. If you tear these points off and go to Luma, Luma will do the same thing. What Luma is doing though is that Luma is, in Photoshop, you know, you can actually do a contrast curve and change the blending mode to luminosity only, which will give you contrast without impacting the color. That's exactly what's going on in here in Luma. So if you click and you add contrast now, you'll see that the image is contrastier, but it didn't pick up that warm cast because we're not changing the color of it all. So this Luma is the effect of doing a luminosity blending mode on an RGB curve in Photoshop. And then again, you have independent channels, red, green, and blue, all of which you can work on separately. So that gets us through the exposure panel. Are there any questions about this part? Okay. The next one over, if you click on this, this is the Navigator. I don't know anybody who uses this. The focus tool is the only thing that would be of any reason to have in here or again to use in here. This focus tool is something that we actually put into the camera menu here. So if you click back on your camera menu here, you'll notice down at the very bottom, if you collapse a couple of these, you need to get blank space down at the bottom. Camera focus right here is only for phase cameras. It actually controls the focus of your lens. That's not the same thing as focus check. So I'm going to just hover in this area down here. Again, do a right click. For me, that is a control click, add tool, and put focus down here at the bottom. This is where I would actually check focus. If you click on the little magnifying glass here and drop it on her face, this is how you can actually check focus while a shooting is going on. So that is the only thing that I would use in this group right here. So this tool is pretty worthless to me. So to be perfectly honest with you, I get rid of it. So I don't use the Navigator part. Again, what I do if I want to navigate is I simply hover over my image, hold down the space bar, and double click on the area that I want to zoom into. Still holding down the space bar, I can quickly zoom around. If you double click again to zoom out, you can then double click to zoom into a different area. This is how I navigate. It's just much faster and it's much easier to do. And if you've got multiple images and you hold down this shift key, it'll do it all for them. So for me, I don't really have a reason to use this tool, so I get rid of the entire tool set. To do that, control click over the icon at the top, and we are going to remove the tool tab. And the one that we are removing is the details tab right here. So simply click on that. It's going to say, are you sure you want to get rid of that? And I'm going to say, yep, I am sure I want to get rid of this. The crop tool is another one that I don't use, and the reason I don't use the crop tools is because it exists right up here. It's always sitting right up here, so I don't need it. It's taking up real estate down here that I don't want to give, or that I don't want taken up. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. Control click on this, and I'm going to remove the composition tool. And I'm going to say remove that guy, and it's gone as well. If you want to get one of those back, hover over the blank area that's right here, hold down your control key and click, and you are going to add a tool tab, and we can actually add one of those guys back in. So again, the one that I got rid of was the details one and the composition one. So one that I don't have here that I do want here is color. So I'm again hovering over this. So take a look where I'm in this area right in here. I'm going to hold down the control key, click. I'm going to come here and I am going to add a tool tab, and the one I want to add is color. So add tool tab, color. Did that work for everyone? Okay, if you want to keep your organization complete, typically the two gears that you've got here are processing for your files. You more than likely would want to do your color correction before you actually do the tool tab, before you do the processing, and that's how we're going to do it here in this class. So we need to move this thing over right next to the exposure part. So to move this guy, again, if you hover over this, it'll tell you, if you hold down your command key and click on it, you can actually drag it to a different spot. So I'm going to move it over right next to my exposure. So again, I start with library, camera, exposure, and then I go to color. And if you click on color, you will actually see in this drop-down menu right here that, again, you've got another histogram going on here. It's the same tool that we got rid of in the exposure panel. I don't use it here any more than I used it in the exposure panel. So I'm going to click on those little three dots to get rid of that guy. I need more space in here. I've already worked with base characteristics. I don't need to keep that here. Base characteristics was in my exposure control. So I'm going to get rid of base characteristics here. White balance was also in that control, but white balance impacts color, so I think I'm going to leave that guy here. I'm going to leave normalize here. Normalize is a new tool that they've introduced here. We'll deal with these guys later. So I'm going to close up white balance. I'm going to close up normalize. Color balance is sitting right here, and then black and white is also in this group right here. I'm sorry? Oh. Anyway, color balance is in here, black and white's in here. I'm going to collapse black and white. I'm going to leave it on here for the second, and I'm going to come down to the color editor. So does everybody have the color editor? Okay, now this is going to be one of the more challenging parts of this whole lecture, so I'm begging you guys to stay with me on this, because one of the things that you'll find about color editing in Capture One is there are parts of it that are so far superior to what you can do in Photoshop, it's ridiculous. So especially for people who are doing fashion and beauty work, there are things in here that you're going to really care about. So we're going to go through this. It can be a little bit confusing the way it works. It doesn't work the same way it does in Photoshop. So just bear with me. If you get lost at any point in this, please stop me so that we can actually get you caught back up again. So that's basically what's going to happen here. There's a different file that I want you to start with on this, though. If you scroll down, the file I want you to start with is this one. It's sort of near the bottom, called Spectrum. Can everybody turn that guy? Can you guys find that? Okay. In Spectrum, I need to make sure I've actually, it's signaling to me that I've done something to this file. That's what this little icon down here is about. If you want to reset the file so that there's absolutely nothing that has been done to it, you have two options. The first is if you come up here to the very top, and you'll actually see there is, so remember when we were talking about doing this, I'm going to open up the white balance one. Well, you don't even need to see it. You can see it right here in white balance. You'll see that there's that little baby arrow that points up to the back up to the left. That's a reset, but it's just a reset for this tool alone. If you want to do a global reset, meaning it'll reset everything, it's the same icon, but it's the bigger one that's up here at the very top. If you click that, you'll actually then return this. This has now been completely reset, and you'll notice that little icon that's in the lower right-hand corner is gone, telling me that this is a version of this file. Nothing else has happened. If you hit Command-Z to undo that, it brings it back. You'll see that little icon comes back here. The other way to get a virgin copy of this file, again, is to hold down the Control key and hover over this guy, Command-click, and again, we are going to do a new variant, not a clone variant, but a new variant of it. And you'll see that kicks down right here, and you'll see now my number one variant up here at the top does have something that has been changed on it. It doesn't tell me what, but I know that something has been changed. But the new one down here doesn't, because again, when you do new variant, it gives you a copy of your file that has no adjustments made on it. And then you can simply click on the one that's on the top and delete it, and it actually is gone away. And the variant that remains is the one that doesn't have any changes done on it. So then in the color editor, with it opened up, it always opens up to basic, and I'm going to make this tool really easy for you guys and tell you there's no reason to ever use basic, ever. Basic has got a preset of 6 determinate slices of the color wheel pie, as it were. Nobody ever uses it. Don't bother with it. I'm not sure why they still have it, to be honest with you. We want to actually go over to Advanced. And if you click on Advanced, you will see that things get pretty simple here. We're not catching a whole lot here, so I'm going to show you how this guy works and basically the way it does work. So with Advanced, is everybody here? Because this is the important part. If I lose you at this stage of the game, I'm not getting you back. Okay, so with Advanced selected, the way color correction works in Capture One is you actually have to select a range of color that you want to be impacted. So to do that, come over here and just click on this little eyedropper that's sitting right down here. And I'm going to come over and I'm simply going to pick an area right here in the middle of this, in the middle of the yellows. And you'll see that when you do that, there's a thing that comes up on your color wheel. I'm going to zip out of Capture One really quickly just to show you what this color wheel truly looks like. This is what we're actually looking at right here, and it works exactly this way. So the things that you need to know about this, let me go back, because I lose my cursor whenever I run this. So what's happening here, this is the color wheel right here. Red by default is right over here at 3 o'clock. Its complementary color is cyan at 9 o'clock. The area right in the middle is the place where the complementary colors, red and cyan, mix together and completely neutralize each other out. So this little point right here in the very middle is completely desaturated red or desaturated cyan. And it's the same for green is the complementary of magenta, yellow is the complement of blue. They all meet right here at this point where there is no, they all have hue, but none of them have any saturation, and that's why they are completely gray. If you then travel from this gray point out to the very edge, this very edge represents the greatest amount of saturation. And that's exactly what's going on in this color wheel right here. The color that we picked is halfway, again, remember this point right here in the very middle. This is totally neutral gray right here in the middle. The most of the saturated colors are sitting out here on the side, out here, and the color we picked is this little dot. However, you'll see that it didn't pick just one single color. It actually picked a range of colors, and those range of colors are defined by this wedge right here. To really show you the colors that are being picked, if you come down here underneath this and you click on this View Selected Color Range, there's a little checkbox right next to that. If you click on that, what it does is it turns everything that is not selected to a black and white. So now you can see that the range that has been selected is sitting right in here. You'll also notice that, again, this area up in here in the top has not been selected. It's falling out of my saturation range. But you'll notice that is this area between the oranges right here and the greens right here are sitting right here in this range right here. If you click on the middle one of these, so you'll see there's 3 little dots that are sitting up here at the top. If you click on this, the one in the very middle, you'll see, or hover over it, you get a double-headed arrow. If you click, you can rotate this to a different area, and you will see the area of your color that's being selected is completely moves. If you continue to drag it all the way around, you'll see it's starting to creep back in on the other side. So as I'm dragging around this, you can see the color range that's actually being selected in this. Does this make sense to everybody what's going on? Are we good on this part? To deselect this, simply click on the color. You'll see there's a check mark with the color sitting right here. Just check on this to highlight the entire thing and click on the minus, and it completely goes away. So now I have no color selected again. I'm going to grab that color selecting tool again, and I'm going to again click on the yellow part right here in the middle. There's other controls that you have at your disposal here as well. And that would be these 2 sliders, there are the 2 handles that are on the outside of this. You'll see, I'm going to click on the one that's on the orange range right here. You can click and bring this down to actually open up that range of selection. So now I've started to add all of the reds to my selection, and I can keep going in that direction. You can do the same thing with the greens. Click on that and you can push that, and you'll see it's starting to expand your range of what is actually selected here. You can go in the opposite direction. You can choke these things down. So I'm dragging both sides in now so that I have a much, much, much more narrow range of color in here. And now you can see it's happening right here just in the middle. What you'll also notice here is in this setup by default that there is the area between the 2 bars right here is completely selected. But then there's this area that's fading out as you start to go to the side. So there's areas here that start to go out of this. What that's telling you is that it's not selecting those colors perfectly. What it's doing is it's actually softening that selection as you start to move away from your color. So again, I am going to get rid of this thing that's been selected by hitting the minus key. I am going to select that yellow point again. And again, what you'll see now here is that there are these fall-offs. So the area that's between these 2, between this green and this orange, is completely selected. Again, the little point that right in the middle was the point that I actually hit. However, these are fall-off ranges that are sitting on here. So what it's saying is as we start to move away from that color in this, it's softly falling off. You can actually sharpen that up, and that is what smoothness is all about. So if you grab the smoothness slider and you drag it all the way back to 0 or back to 1, you'll notice that that softening that was on the edges of here has completely disappeared, and you will see you have really sharp edges in your color right now. If you drag your smoothness all the way in the opposite direction, you will see that those soft areas get huge, and you'll see it pushes out the area that is falling under this is fading, but it's a much softer edge that's coming out. Is this making sense, everybody, what's going on here? So that's basically the way these controls work. You can throw this guy away by clicking on the minus. We're going to do one more click into here to show you what's actually going on here. Now in this case, what it's showing me is that the area that I picked here, it's going from complete saturation, but it's not going down to complete middle gray right now. To get this to go down to complete middle gray, you can actually hover over the line that's right here. You can click and drag it down to that point, and that now will cover that entire range. You can also go the opposite way. You can really narrow these colors down. So I am lifting it up right now. I'm saying I want to narrow my color range even more. You can come up to the top and drag it down as well. So this is now saying I want a much tighter range. If you drop your smoothness all the way down, you'll see that this area is now hovering in a really small area here. You can come up to the side and tighten this up, and you can also tighten this up, and in which case now we've selected an extremely tight range of color here. So that's what's going on there. Is that making sense to everybody? So these are all controls to select the color that you actually want. I'm going to throw this guy away one last time, and then we'll show you what it really does. So again, and then I'm going to simply click and go back to that big sample in the beginning. Then I'm going to turn off this view selected color range. That returns all of the colors, so now I can see everything. But then you've got the controls down here, and these controls now are going to impact that small range of color that we've actually done. You'll also notice down here at the bottom that we've actually got two color swatches right here. These are before and after color swatches, and again, I can't see the final readout here at the very bottom because these will show me the changes that are actually happening in here. So I am going to get rid of normalize. It's just because my screen's so small. I'm going to get rid of normalize, and I'm still going back to my color editor. So now I can see everything here at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and expand my range completely here. The shortcut to just a faster way to get to it, instead of clicking on this and dragging it down, it's this little pie wedge that's down right here at the bottom. If you just click on that, you'll see it drops down. So this has now got the complete color range of that point that I selected, and then varying degrees on either side of this. You'll also see that there's a before and after color swatch right here. So this will show you the changes that you're actually making. So then I'm going to come up to the hue slider, and I'm going to simply grab the hue slider and drag it all the way to the right. And you'll notice that it has now shifted that hue from yellow to green, because that's the way I pushed it. If you drag it all the way back in the opposite direction, you can see that it actually is it's pushing it more into the orange range right here. So all it's doing is moving that color in one direction or another. If you zero hue out by simply double clicking on it, you can go to saturation instead. If you click on saturation and drive it forward, you'll see that it's saturating only those oranges and yellows and little bits of green. The rest of it's actually not. Again, if you want to see a preview of before and after of what this tool is doing, hover over the little arrow that points to the back, hold down your Option key and click, and this will temporarily turn it off, and then it'll temporarily bring it back on. So that's showing you what you're really doing in here. I'm going to double click on the saturation to zero it out, and you also have a lightness slider here as well, and that will actually lighten up that selected range, and it will also darken up that selected range. So that's what's going on in here. Is this sort of making sense to everyone? What's going on? Okay, I don't want any of these to be affecting this image, so I'm simply going to not hold down the Option key, just click on that reverse arrow to drop it back out so that it's actually gone. And now we're actually going to try to work on this guy and to do something a little bit different on a real image. So I want you to come up to the one that says Pastels, and I want you to click on this guy right here. So with Pastels clicked, there's an image that in my case it actually already opens up. I think that there was a selection that had already been made about this, but I want to start from scratch. So I'm simply going to ask you to click on that again, that little reverse arrow to actually undo. So you shouldn't have anything selected here. And you should just have this thing that looks like these chalks. There are these pastel colors. Does that make sense what's going on to everyone here? Okay, so we're going to work with this, and I'm going to say what I'd like to do is it's these chalks that are right here and this sort of red ones that are right in here. I want to change their color, but I don't want to affect anything else in here. I just want to change the color in this part right here. So to do that, again, click on your little little color sampler guy right here and come over, and I'm going to click on, I'm not going to go for this like darker one in the middle. I'm not going to go for that guy. I'm going to go for the one that's right next to it, and I'm simply going to click. And you'll see that I've got a color range that's sitting right here. I then am going to turn on the View Selected Color Range so that everything goes to black and white except the colors that have been selected in here. And you can see that in my color range in here, I've got colors that are off here to the side that are also a part of this. All the greens and the grays and all that kind of stuff that was over here, that's gone. Again, if you can't remember what these colors are, simply hold down your Option key and click on this to temporarily turn that off. So it got rid of all the yellows that are over here, but this range in here is all still in my image right here. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to double click on my hand over here to zoom in so that I can really see what's going on here. I was hoping just to select these guys, but you can see, but because my color range is so large here, it's actually selected colors that are really close to this. I want to see if I can change those colors. So to do this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extend my saturation range because I'm worried that there's color in here that maybe is so saturated, like this guy right up in here, that it's not falling in this range. So again, to expand your entire saturation range, click on this little icon that looks down here. It's to span the full saturation range. So that's now giving me full saturation. If I look at these colors that are up here that are in the orange group, you can see this is the orange part of the color wheel right here. What I need to do is narrow this range down. I need to pull this in to try to get rid of this part right here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm simply going to grab this slider and I'm going to start bringing it a little bit closer. And you see those colors now are starting to actually fade out. They're starting to actually go to gray. I've also, right now I'm getting ready to actually hit the color point that I picked right here. So I can't go much further than that. But I do have this smoothness. This smoothness is actually jumping out and it's causing me problems out here. So I'm going to drop the smoothness down to see if I can't get the rest of that color part out. And you can see in this situation that I've almost completely gotten it out. I'm going to drop that all the way down. So this is now completely gone. However, I do have a problem here. Some of these guys in here got caught in that move. So this is actually going to cause me a little bit of a problem. I'm going to expand this back out a little bit to see if I can't pick those guys up. But whenever I pick this guy up right here, I'm also picking these up. So I'm going to say, you know, end of the day, I don't really worry about this too much. It's mostly going to affect these guys right here. So I'm going to be forgiving. I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, you can affect some of these as well. However, I don't like what's happening right here. You'll see these really hard jumps that are happening in here. There's parts of this that are selected, parts that are not. You need to reintroduce some smoothness in that to actually not have that hit so hard and to jump out so hard. So again, I'm pulling back in stuff so that I catch these pinks right here. I think they're in this area right down in here. They are. This is actually pulling it back. So now I'm going to actually be selecting all of these sort of like pinks and reds and oranges. Is this making sense to everyone? Are we good on this? Again, I'm going to hold down my space bar and double click on my hand to jump back out. So this is now telling me that I can impact these colors. So my first move is in all of this, I'm actually going to take the hue slider and I'm going to drive it all the way over to the right. And you can see what that is doing is that it's actually moving these colors in the direction of this orange, sort of heading towards greens. You can turn off the view selected color range if you want to see this happen in real time with all the other colors there. Again, to see the move that I've made now, hover over this top guy, hold down your Option key. You can click to hold it to turn it on and off, and you can see I'm taking all those pinks and the pinks and the oranges, and I'm moving them towards oranges and greens. So the ones that were orange are being pushed more towards green, and the ones that were in that pinkish range are being pushed more towards the pinkish range right here. But you can see you hit a limit. You can't go any further than this. So there is a bug. I think this is a bug in Capture One that you guys need to know about, and so this is where it comes up right here. You can do multiple versions of this. So again, has everybody pushed that hue all the way to 30 degrees and your color changed? Is anybody not there? Okay, you can do this a second time. So again, grab your color picker, come over and click on that very same spot that we clicked before. So it was this one right here. I'm going to click. It sets a new color point. You'll see now I've got a second sort of set of corrections that's happening down here. I'm going to go ahead and completely expand that range, and then again I'm going to drag my hue all the way over, and you can see it's clearly pushing these guys into the green area right now. Did that work for everyone? You can do it again. Color Sampler tool, click on that same spot that we were dealing with before. You'll notice that these sample points are all identical, and they are all identical because it's actually picking the uncorrected color that's underneath. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and completely expand this and then drag the hue and take it all the way over. And you can see I'm really beginning to push these now all the way. These things are now, they've gone from here all the way up into this range that's happening up in here. Does this make sense to everybody what's going on? Okay, so that part works out really well. However, I need you to get rid of the second two corrections. So simply come down here to the bottom and click to get rid of that one, and then click to get rid of the next one. So we are going to do this, as a matter of fact, click to get rid of all of them. We're going to do this same thing again, but I'm going to show you the bug right now. If you click on this color picker and you come over and you click on that same piece of chalk or pastel that we've been doing, again, I'm going to completely expand my saturation range by clicking on that little icon, and now I'm going to turn on my view selected color, and you can actually see the selected color that's happening right here. Again, I'm missing some of those pinks down there, so I'm going to open this slightly up to go after those guys to actually include them in this. And you can see that that black and white is now gone. I might actually push my smoothness up a little bit more. So I've grabbed all of those color parts. That part's actually working well for me. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab this hue saturation and I'm going to drag it all the way to the right. This time, however, I'm going to leave this view selected color range turned on and just do the same thing again. Again, it was this piece of pastel right here that I picked. I'm going to select it a second time, and then I'm going to drag the hue all the way over again. And you'll notice that nothing changes. So our cumulative effect is not happening, and the reason it's not happening is because you've got this view selected color range turned on. If you turn it off, you will see that you do get that cumulative color part. But with view selected on, you only see one level of color correction. You don't get anything else. Does that make sense to everyone? So it's just something to be aware about. Are we good on this part? All right, I'm going to throw away this bottom one. I'm going to keep the top one. And again, if you want to see what's changing here, this top one here, again, hold down your Option key, click on the little back arrow right here, and you can see that's what's actually been shifted. But you'll notice we haven't shifted any of the greens or any of the blues. Your color correction is not restricted to just one color range. We can actually change something else. So I'm going to say come over here to the more teal over here. I'm going to actually pick this guy right here. So I'm going to do a color sampler point here. And again, you'll see you get another readout down here at the bottom. If you want to see what is being selected, click on the View Selected Color Range. This is what it's actually picking up. Again, I'm going to completely expand this range by clicking on this, so it's my entire saturation range. I want it to grab a little bit more of this cyanic blues that are right in here. So you can see to get those, I'm going to come over here to this guy, and I'm going to drag this to open it up. And you'll see that it's starting to grab more of my blues into here. I'm going to zoom into this guy right here. I don't know why it's not picking all of this. It may be a saturation issue right here. So again, I'm going to expand my entire saturation range, but it's still not grabbing these colors right here. And so I need to see what colors those really are. So again, I'm going to temporarily hold down the Option key to turn it off. And those colors are not being picked up because those are actually not cyanic pieces of charcoal. Those are actually brown charcoal. That's actually, gray charcoal that's sitting on top, that's in this box in the wrong area. And somehow I've picked up another one of those guys. So that's not going to help me here. I'm never going to get those guys because those guys don't belong in this group. However, now, again, I'm going to hold down my space bar, click to get back out. You can see nothing else is selected in this image. So now I'm going to take my hue and change it and go in the opposite direction. And I'm going to make those all greener. And then again, turn off your view selected color range. So now what I'm doing is I'm changing these to one color, these to another color. If you want to temporarily turn off that color correction, it's these little check boxes that are right here. You can see if I uncheck that check box, it turns off that color correction. And if I uncheck the other check box here, it turns off that color correction. If I turn off both, this is what the image looks like in its original state. So is this all making sense to everyone? Are we good on this part? Okay, I want to try one more here. We are going to work on real images in just a second, but I need to make sure that you guys understand what's really happening in all of this. So let's reset everything here. To reset everything, again, instead of holding on the Option key, simply click on this guy to get rid of it. So in the color correction part that we've been doing so far, this is actually working out pretty well for us. But we have a problem in this, and the problem that we have in this is that there are areas that I want to remember when I actually was trying to make my selection here, I couldn't get rid of this area that was over here. So let's just do it again. So I'm going to, again, click on the Color Sampler tool, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to select, again, that same sort of reddish, pinkish reddish piece of charcoal right here. I'm going to click on that guy, and then I'm going to view my selected color. And when I do this, I'm actually going to, again, I'm going to expand my range. What I want to do, though, is I only want to select this group that's right in here. But no matter how much I choke this down, so I'm going to start to choke this down. I'm going to come in really close to this guy right here. I'm just tightening everything up. I'm going to come down here as well. I'm just drawing all of these areas in so that they're extremely tight. It's a very narrow range. It's just this little range that's happening right around this tool right here. And you can see that it does a pretty good job of selecting this, but it's still got some of these pinks in here. It's still got a few of the pinks in here, and it's still got some of this orange color in here. And that is a problem for me. So what I would like to do is actually mask this out. And I'm going to say this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's take a break right now, guys. That'll give Kelsey a chance to get a computer and get this downloaded. It'll give you a chance to get a break. It'll get everybody to sort of shake your head, and because the next part we're going to go into is exactly this same work, but it gets even more complex. Are there questions about this so far? Are we good on this part? All right. Let's call this 10 o'clock. If you guys could be back at quarter after, that'd be great. Kelsey, if you can get a chance to get a computer, there's a set of files to download, and then we'll just pick back up when you get back.